Another new way to apply shading to a surface is the blended box map. With it, you simply project maps onto a surface in world or object coordinate space. As the name indicates, blended box map allows you to blend multiple maps. That way you can get seamless texture coverage. That's very helpful, especially for complex models like this terrain. Let's take a look at that terrain. I'll select it, go over to the Modify panel just to show you that it's a plane primitive with a displace modifier. I'm using a height map to create the elevation here. And because it's a plane primitive, I can have a low level of detail in the viewport for performance, but render at much higher level of detail. Select that plane object in the modifier stack. In the render multipliers section, there's a density parameter. This will multiply the number of polygons in the plane by this density value squared. With a density of 5, I'm multiplying the number of polygons by 5 times 5, or 25. And that's going to yield about 800,000 triangles. Let's do a test render. Click on Render Production. Here's our rendering in Arnold with global illumination, but no blended box map just yet. Close the rendered frame window and open the Material Editor. In the Material Editor, you'll see that I've got some nodes already prepared. The ground physical is a physical material that is currently assigned onto the terrain. Double-click on that label, and we can see that it is a white material with a high roughness and a mid-range diffuse roughness. That means this terrain will have no specular highlights. Let's create the blended box map. It's found in the Material Map browser, in Maps, General, Blended Box Map. Click and drag that over into the view. Double-click it, and let's rename it. I'll call it Terrain Diffuse. And then connect it to the physical material's base color map. As soon as we do that, we see the map appear in the physical material preview. Let's make a couple quick adjustments. With its parameters displayed, we want to go into the Project Onto section, and to simplify our workflow, set Project Onto to Auto. This is going to automatically stretch the textures to fit the object in X, Y, and Z dimensions. And speaking of X, Y, and Z, we have the number of projections up here. And it's defaulted to 3 projections. We could also choose 6 if we wanted 6 different projections, but I'm only going to use 3 this time. Top and bottom refers to projections along the Z-axis. Left and right is projection along X, and front and back is projection along Y. And that is why we have these characteristic colors. X is red, Y is green, and Z is blue. With many maps, we can display them in the viewport, but the blended box map may not work. If you want to try displaying it in the viewport, what you do is you select the Material node, not the map, and go up into the Material Editor toolbar. And you may be accustomed to the Show Shaded Material in Viewport button. Click on that, and ordinarily you would see a map, but as you can see, we're getting black here in the view. Click and hold that button down and choose Show Realistic Material in Viewport, and you might be able to see some preview there. Okay, but that's heavily dependent upon your hardware, and it may or may not actually work. The only way to know what you're really going to get is to do a rendering. So let's do that. I'll go over to the main toolbar and click Render Production. Here's our first attempt with just solid colors in the top, bottom, left, right, and front, back slots. And we have the default blending. So let's move this over a little bit. Take a look at this. We've got in our blended box map, we have a blend amount. And that is what's producing this soft transition here between the different colors. I want that to be a little bit more of a sharp transition, so I'll set the blend amount down to 15 and then do another test render. With a blend amount of 15, we're getting a sharper transition between the colors. We can also modulate that transition with another map, and that's known as a blend map. We could plug that into this slot here. I've got one prepared already in the view. I can navigate here with the middle mouse button Down near the bottom, I've got Blend 3D is the name of a noise map. I'll click and drag on that output and send it over to the Terrain Diffuse Blended Box Maps Texture Blend input. And now that's connected. We see that there has been an update in the viewport, but because we've got a low quality display in the viewport, we won't really be able to tell much difference. So we'll do another rendering. Click the Render button in the rendered frame window or Render Production on the main toolbar. Once that completes, we can see that we've got a mottled appearance here because the transition between those colors is being modulated by this noise map here. Finally, we want to check the scaling of the maps in the various dimensions of X, Y, and Z. And to do that, I've prepared 3 checker maps here. And we'll override the colors in the blended box map with these checker maps. Blue is going to be connected to texture 1. Red checker connected to texture 2. Green checker connected to texture 3. With those connections made, we can check in on our viewport, and as you can see, it's taking a while to update, and it may not actually update ever. So at this point, I'm going to opt out of displaying these in the viewport. I'll select the Material node and simply disable Show Realistic Material in Viewport. And you need to click that button twice to turn it completely off. Okay, so let's now do a rendering with those checkers applied. See what that looks like. The checker maps are applied to the surface from the X, Y, and Z directions, but as we can see, the scaling is all wrong. We'll correct this in the following movie.